while we're in the neighborhood
of
Jared Goff possibly throwing a ball away when he should have, I don't see it in the outline, but I have to mention, because it really was creating a stir last night on social media, as it should have. First drive of the game.
Yeah.
Jared Goff, under duress, throws a pass. Looks like maybe it would be intentional grounding, although we know that the officials apply a very broad definition of what it means for the ball to land in the vicinity of an eligible receiver. So, after the play, Joe and Troy bring in John Perry, longtime NFL official, 20 years or something like that. Credentials. Listen to this guy. Everything he says is true. Every network's got one of those guys. And John Perry says, should have been grounding. Drive ends, field goal, go to break, come back. All of a sudden, we got a cameo.
Whoa.
Unannounced cameo, like Don Rickles walking onto Johnny Carson's set. Google it, kids. Anyway, here's Walt Anderson. Walt Anderson, the NFL's executive VP of officiating or senior VP of officiating, whatever. He's the guy in charge of officiating. And for the first time ever, live during a game.
It was amazing.
From 345 Park Avenue.
Right.
They're interviewing Walt Anderson, and he says, hey, we give them a lot of flexibility when they're in that setting to throw the ball away. And the ball was in the direction and vicinity of Jahmyr Gibbs. He could have reached his hand up in the air and touched it, so it was a good call.
Right.
First time ever that that's happened.
Yeah.
Now, two problems with this.
Okay.
Well, three. First of all, the rule doesn't say that the ball must be thrown in the direction and vicinity of the player. The rule says the ball must be thrown in the direction of a player and land in the vicinity of a player. It has to land in the vicinity of a player. So you just can't fire it over the head of a guy who just happens to be in the path of the ball and it lands 15 yards away. You threw it in his direction. It sure as hell didn't land in his vicinity. So, number one, Anderson got the rule wrong. I know it's too much to expect the person in charge of officiating to have the rules right. I'm sorry. I'm being too demanding. I'm asking for too much. That the man in charge of the officiating function throughout the league knows the rules. I'm sorry that I want that much. I apologize. Second, you undermine the guy that's on the payroll with ESPN to come in and explain this. Like, why even have John Perry? If you press a button and Walt Anderson materializes and explains the call. So what's the point in ESPN having John Perry, NBC having Terry McCauley, Fox having Dean Blandino, CBS having Gene Steratore? There's no need for it. We got this button we can press, and there's Walt Anderson. That's what was weird about it as well. And he contradicted what John Perry said. And finally, box full of Pandora, Chris. They have that when they did that, they threw open the box of Pandora, and Pandora is everywhere now because, I mean, I thought about it later in the game. There was some call later in the game, and they're talking about his right call. Well, the fumble. There was a fumble. A fumble, non-call call. Is it a fumble? Is it not a fumble? Well, press the button. Where's Walt? We know you've got the capacity to do it. We know Walt's hanging around in his NFL Shield polo, ready to. He's camera ready. Hit the button and have him explain it. That's the problem. You can't just pick and choose the moments you're going to be transparent. Transparency is something that happens all the time. Not, hey, look at this. Here's Walt Anderson to talk about a meaningless play in the grand scheme of things. All right, fine, but now you better use him for the stuff that happens in the second half when the game's close and it's more eventful and consequential. This was, of all, let me measure my words carefully. I want to be like Devontae Adams. I don't want to say something that's going to be taken out of context. Of all the mistakes I've seen the NFL make when it comes to officiating, this may be the worst one ever. I'll say it. Because they have now created this weird, loose, vague expectation or idea that we're going to get input from the league on some of these controversial calls. When else is it going to happen? Where else is it going to happen? It was, in a word, bizarre.
It was shocking to me, too. I'm with you there. It really was. And you're right. Once you saw him once, I would go, oh, wait, Reynolds fumbled inside the 5, right? I think that's when you were talking about when Max Crosby, who, I mean, is an unbelievable football player. When we were talking about the Raiders, we should have at least spent 2 minutes on how amazing he is, right? But either way, that was the moment where you're like, wow, that was a dicey call. It looked like forward momentum had stopped. I mean, it was a mosh pit of players. From all due accounts, it looked like the lower body was down. It also looked like that the referees never saw a fumble, and here's my biggest problem with the play, that they let the Raiders defense talk them into it as a fumble, right? That to me was an issue. They didn't call it a fumble, and the Raiders were like, we got the ball, we got the ball, we got the ball, we got the ball. And after about a minute, they went, okay, yeah, your ball. Well, now we'll review it. Okay, now you screwed over the Lions because you just listened to the Raiders, and now that's the call on the field, and we're going to need that. But, yeah, I'm with you there. They opened up Pandora's box. I'll be interested. I mean, they, to me, showed like, hey, then why can't we do this all the time with all games and have somebody there to talk and do that and talk it through a little bit? I have no problem.
Especially standalone games.
Right. That's
when
where
there's
I think
one
it's
game
important.
on at a time.
Right.
That prime time, standalone games. And look, there was a time, not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, where the NFL had senior VPs of officiating who were available, were transparent, were willing to say mistakes were made when mistakes were made. It was Mike Pereira and then Dean Blandino. And why? Look, Dean Blandino told me as tactfully as he could on the record during a PFT-PM interview 6-7 years ago, the NFL doesn't value that position the way that it should, which is a nice way of saying the NFL is too cheap to pay what's necessary for someone great to be in that job. So if they were going to do this, I mean, they've shown us they can. Fine. Let's bring back Dean Blandino. Let's pay him accordingly.
Wow,
and have Blandino be the one that for... And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to run Terry McAulay, Gene's territory, and John Perry, and McCauley's involved in Thursday night as well. I'm not trying to take money out of anyone's pockets. But if they're going to do this, if they're going to just show it to us once in a while, you got to do it all the time. And you bring back Blandino, you pay him accordingly, and he's the guy that's available to all the networks during the games. You press the button and he comes in, and he tells you the truth. It can't just be propaganda. It's got to be the truth. See, that's the problem. They don't necessarily want, and this starts with 345 Park Avenue. I think it trickles out to the partners. I don't know how much they want transparency and truth. I don't know that they want to admit that mistakes were made. It's a tough spot.
It is
But
tough.
The bottom line is they have done more harm than good for the long-term interest by just showing and doing out of nowhere, kind of randomly, for a call that wasn't all that important, this new thing that we may or may not see again. It just, at a time when it feels like officiating is under siege, this is not the way to try to stop the bleeding, Chris.
I hear you there. Well, the big picture, just on to do that before we get back to the game a little bit, is that, when Mike Pereira and Dean Blandino, the way they used to do it, I think soothed over, it quieted a lot of the noise on the outside about that. It made you feel like, hey, here's a guy who really knows what he's talking about. He's all over it. He explained it the right way, and it quiets the haters and the mouth breathers out there a little bit. There's nothing like that from the NFL right now. That's where I think, and then, of course, it seems like people have less trust in the refs right now than ever before. Let alone, I would say, it does seem a little bit all over the place. So it'd be great if they could find, a voice like that. I don't know. I don't even care if it's in the game, whatever. After the games are over, Monday, Tuesday, just to explain to the fans and everybody the thoughts and the process in which, went on behind the scenes with some of these calls. I think it would go a long way to soothe some people over for sure.
I don't think the NFL should be infringing on the broadcasts. I think it's something that should happen separate and apart.
I agree.
From the broadcast.
I
really
right.
do.
Right.
That's what made it even weirder last night, that ESPN let them do it.
Yes.
Somebody at Disney should have said, no, we're not doing this. We refuse to do it. At some point, the billions we pay you should have some sway. We're not doing this. You can do a video and put it on Twitter if you want. Remember there was a time they would do that?
Sure.
They would do, like when Al Riveron was the guy, they would do a video and it really wouldn't say anything. Like, what was the point? He explained it in the most basic, obvious terms possible. He never waded close to anything controversial. And Chris, one last point before we do go back to the game.
Yeah.
One of the problems with Pereira and Blandino being willing to admit mistakes, it pissed off the officials. They didn't want to be criticized. They didn't want their mistakes to be pointed out. Well, you know what I say? That tough shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't make
right.
mistakes then.
That's right.
Everybody else gets criticized for their mistakes. You're riding around in the Pope Mobile, then you're insulated from all criticism because you make a mistake.
Yeah.
We're supposed to lie and say it really wasn't a mistake. Get out of here with that. If you don't like it, get out and let somebody else take the job.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Right. Hey, it's the NFL. It's the big boy league, okay? So criticism's real. Referee should get it too. You're right. It keeps everybody in check. That's fine. They used to have I thought the right touch there with what they used to do. So we'll see where it goes. I do think I had no problem with that being not called grounding. I will say that, to get back to the main point.
Right.
That was okay. We see guys, quarterbacks do that and throw it in the general vicinity. I know that wasn't the vicinity of where it landed, but I mean, it was 3 inches from hitting him in the head too. So I think it was vicinity enough for me.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.